Good morning, officer.
Good morning.
So when you're operating the FLIR system, as you testified previously, it detects infrared heat, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you described it kind of like playing a video game, which, as we can see, that you're following it with maybe like a joystick or some controller.
It's a hand controller that has multiple controls on it.
And when you initially began what you described as observing this vehicle, that's just what you were doing. You had no information to believe that the occupants inside were involved in something serious or not. It was just a suspect vehicle that you were tasked with keeping track of, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it was only after the gas station on Rio Grande that this turned into something more serious for you, right?
At that point, yes.
And when I say turned into something more serious for you, I mean as a law enforcement officer, you then knew that you were dealing with something more than maybe just perhaps traffic violations or suspicious vehicle, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you've reviewed this video several times, correct?
Yes, sir.
And at the 2:07 mark, when I say 2:07, 2 minutes and about 7 seconds, it looks like an infrared heat source, which appears to be a person, approached the vehicle. But did that person get in the vehicle or just approach it and then run back to the house?
It looked like, to me, they approached the vehicle. The vehicle then drove off with the door still open as it was moving, and then that person did not get into the vehicle.
Okay. That's what it looked like to me too. And and maybe somebody else has testified to something else, but on the video that you looked at, that you actually recorded, your testimony would be that it appears that someone ran from the shadows of a building or whatever, approached the vehicle, and then ran back, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
I wouldn't say run, but it approached the vehicle and then...
Kind of sauntering, actually, not
Yes.
even running, kind of sauntering a little bit, maybe.
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay. Then at about the 2:13 mark, after the vehicle looks like it exited on Unser, did you notice that something, it looked like a heat source, whatever that item might have been, actually was thrown or tossed from the car?
I did notice it in reviewing the video. I did not notice it in real time.
Okay. Now, let's talk with the jury a few minutes. I think you've kind of explained this well, and I appreciate that. When things, with infrared, that technology is designed to pick up a source a heat source, right?
It's designed to decipher between heat temperatures.
All right. So maybe if I throw something that's on fire out of the car, that's going to be a big heat source, right?
Yes, sir.
It's going to glow white hot.
Yes, and something very small can put off a heat source if it's warm, i.e. a cigarette.
That was going to be the next one. A cigarette, that would be a heat source, right?
Yes, sir.
And then when an item that's been held in, like if I have something in my hand, that item is going to warm to some degree, right?
Yes, it's going to transfer the body heat from you to that item.
Okay. And so if I'm holding something and I throw it out the window, for instance, that's going to be, at least for a moment, for a time, that's going to show a heat signature, right?
Yes, sir.
And then as that item begins to cool, that heat signature is going to lessen, right?
Yes, sir.
It would lessen to whatever the temperature, the air temperature is, right?
It would go back to an ambient temperature, yes.
Ambient temperature, that's a smarter way of saying. So it would consistent with what the temperature is in the surroundings, right?
Yes.
Okay. So just as you don't, in retrospect, certainly don't know what might have been thrown out of the vehicle on Unser, whether it was a cigarette or whether it was whatever, right? At the moment, at the time, you didn't know what had been tossed or ejected or thrown out of the car there at the Valero, right?
No, sir. I was not aware of what the item was.
Certainly, you're flying at night, right?
Yes, sir.
And when you turn, we see the photo, we see the camera come on in real time. You talked a moment ago about the resolution not being fantastic, right?
The resolution of the daytime camera is not that great. It's a lower quality daytime camera, but we didn't purchase it for the daytime camera. It was purchased for its infrared abilities.
And the infrared, once you get used to it, it's very, very useful, right?
Yes.
Because it allows you to basically see in the dark.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's why we can see people so well, because most human beings, I think, are 98.6 degrees, right?
Or warmer,
Or
depending on their
warmer.
environment.
Maybe if they got a big fever there, you know.
Or if they're coming inside or outside of a residence or a vehicle.
Sure, but a night in May is going to be substantially cooler than the body temperature of a human being, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's why when we see the person approaching the car, that person, he, she, appears to be a light source or emitting a very a white light, right?
To me, it told me that the person was warm, and based upon other characteristics, it appeared that they had just come out of a residence or something.
All right. Now, it seems like maybe the officers, at the Valero, when we see the officers converge on the vehicle, on the suspect vehicle, they have, I think they have armored vests on, most likely. Does that tend to block the heat signature at all?
It does. It would actually, you can tell if they're layered, because it's going to be giving off, the vest is going to be giving off a different temperature than the body.
I got it.
And, the vest can warm up because of the environment that they were in. But yes, you would be able, sometimes to be able to tell that there's different layers on them.
All right, so when the jury's looking at the video and the officers seem to be giving off a different pattern, you would expect that based on maybe body armor or uniforms, whereas just other individuals who aren't wearing as many layers of clothing might give off a different signature.
Yes, sir. Through experience and training with it, I would expect to see differences that a normal person that's not familiar with it wouldn't see.
Okay. Now, all you know is what at the time. All you know is what you're looking at, right? You don't know the names of the occupants of the vehicle, right?
No, sir.
Okay. And you haven't been told, you haven't been relayed any information, at least before the robbery on the alleged robbery on Rio Grande, about why you're following the car. And then when you're tracking the vehicle, it's because you received this information about this alleged robbery on Rio Grande, right?
Well, we were originally tasked to the area to assist our detectives in reference to the incident from the previous night. I was aware of the call. I didn't know how this was related. I wasn't privy to all the information that the detectives had at the time.
So you knew it must be pretty high priority, but you didn't have any specifics about who was believed to be in the vehicle, right?
No, sir.
Okay. And when the car stops, it appears to stop, the Impala that you were following appears to stop on a side street, right?
Yes, sir.
And an individual gets out of the driver's seat, right?
Yes, sir.
And then gets in where?
It looks like he enters in through the rear driver's side passenger door.
And it's the rear driver's side passenger door that has something other than, it has like some other something on the windshield.
It appeared to, yes.
Like tape or plastic or
It
something.
appeared, through what I could see and reviewing the video, it appeared to be some type of plastic.
Okay. And then that back door clearly opens, but maybe the window was broken or something, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we don't see who slides in or who gets into the driver's seat, right?
No, sir.
Okay. And so you have no information to offer the jury about who's driving either before the incident on Rio Grande, right?
No.
Or after the incident on Rio Grande?
No.
Okay. And then when, and then during or after the incident on Rio Grande, during what I guess I'll describe as the pursuit.
Yes, sir.
You've described what you saw and what you observed. A state police officer attempts to make a traffic stop, right?
Yes, sir.
And then ultimately the vehicle was stopped with multiple units, law enforcement of a different variety of departments, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then as they take the individuals out of the car, right, you only know what was recorded on the video camera, right?
Yes, sir.
And you don't know when they're taken out of the vehicle, who gets out of the rear driver, right?
I was blocked on the driver of the vehicle,
Okay.
but the driver is usually, per our policy and training, is the first person removed from the vehicle. That I observed a female exit the vehicle first, or what appeared to be first to me.
Okay.
Then I observed a second subject come out of the rear passenger side.
Okay.
And then I observed a third subject come out through the front passenger, which in our training, again, we would have any persons on the passenger side climb over and exit out of the driver's side.
And that's the protocol for a variety of reasons, right?
We try to stay to that, but that's how we were trained, or at least that's how I was trained at my time in the academy.
Sure. You take the driver out first because presumably that's the person in control of the motor vehicle,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And then the person in the back seat, the back seat passenger, they got down, and we see that on the video, right?
Yes, sir.
And then the third person gets out through, and that's the front passenger comes out through the driver door.
Yes, and again, it would be, we're trained to take out the driver first to remove the ability for them to flee again in the vehicle. At that point, then it's removing the rest of the occupants. It's kind of at the discretion of the officers, but, you know, they try to follow a systematic pattern, but it doesn't work every time.
Sure, and it appears from at least the recording that we've observed that the taking out of the passengers, the driver, the rear passenger, the front seat passenger, it was without incident, right?
Yes, sir.
Nobody tried to make a break for it.
Not that I observed, no.
And based on what you both observed here, and then you've never learned that anybody tried to make a break for it or tried
No,
to
sir.
run, right? Okay. And you witnessed the driver, the front passenger, that person's exit appeared to be without incident as well. Person comes out, hands up, obeys the commands of the officers, at least from what you could see, right?
From what I could see from my vantage point, yes.
And you're not hearing this, you don't have a microphone to hear what's going on, right?
No, sir.
All right. But just based on your observations, no attempts by any of the people to flee?
Not that I observed, no.
Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about driving behaviors for a moment of the vehicle. Before, and I'll separate this up in before the Rio Grande,
Yes,
the
sir.
gas station, and then after the Rio Grande. Before the Rio Grande, you described, what you described was, let's see, was it the heat? You gave some sort of acronym or some sort of name for evasive driving. What did you call it?
There's a term called a heat run.
Heat run, okay.
Yes.
And during the driving patterns prior to the Rio Grande gas station, you described that as, at least at some points in time, being consistent with a heat run, correct?
There was times, yes. A heat run is not exactly a set. It's just a term for when there is evasive driving. It doesn't mean there's evasive driving all the time. There's just, you know, we use it as a term, hey, he's making a lot of turns. This may be a heat run.
Does HEAT stand for anything? Is that an acronym for anything, or is it just kind of police lingo?
I think it's just kind of lingo. I've never heard of an exact acronym for it.
Okay. And it's a rather non-scientific term, right?
Yes.
All right. And so when you described, like, say, for instance, before the Rio Grande, into the gas station, there were some rolling stops, right?
Yes, sir.
And there appeared to be some rather random turns down random side streets, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so when you described, at least prior to the Rio Grande gas station, behaviors consistent with a heat run or evasive driving, you would maintain that at least there were some driving patterns consistent with evasive behaviors prior to the Rio Grande.
I wouldn't say evasive behaviors. They're behaviors to try to learn if there's somebody following them.
It's making sure someone's not following, maybe ditching anybody that's following you, things like that.
Or observing if a vehicle makes the same turns as them, they may be following them.
And the term ditching somebody, that's not exactly a scientific term, but you know what I mean, right?
Yes, I understand.
Okay. And for the jury, that would mean if somebody's following you, you're
Trying to lose them.
throw them off your tail or
Yes.
ditch them, right? Okay. And then after the Rio Grande incident, the incident was reported to you as a robbery, we see more of this evasive type driving, correct?
It became more evasive, higher speeds, more blatant stop sign and traffic violations.
Now, if someone's paying attention, say if they've, can they hear your helicopter above them?
I would believe so. Overhead, there would be no reason for it. We're trying to follow the vehicle at a standard speed or at the speed that the vehicle wants to travel.
And one of the things you said during direct examination was that you would do your best not to create a fleeing or flight incident, right?
Yes,
Okay. And you did that in this situation?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great. Now, you indicated on direct examination that based on, well, let me ask you first. When you were observing the vehicle when it pulled into the Valero off Rio Grande and Rio Bravo and Broadway, did you the Valero, right?
Yes,
All right.
I got confused on the gas station. I understand where you are now.
Did you initially see something come out of the vehicle?
Yes, that one I did observe in real time.
Okay. And would you have been observing in the color sequence, the color camera, or would you have been observing on the infrared?
I observed it in the infrared.
Okay.
The reason that I switched to the daylight camera is to show that the vehicles that were coming in with the vehicle actually had red and blue lights on them.
I got it. And this Impala it's a four-door sedan, right?
That's all I knew. I didn't know the vehicle type till you told me. All I knew was it was a light-colored four-door vehicle.
Okay. And your testimony is that this video and what you were observing in real time, what we have is what you believe. Your testimony is that you see the window partially cracked, the front passenger partially cracked, and something come out of the video which turned out to be come out of the window that turned out to be a gun, right?
Yes, I believe, based upon what I saw in the video, that the item that came out of the vehicle did come from the front seat.
Okay.
That's based upon what I was able to observe.
And then front seat out of the front passenger?
Front passenger.
Okay. And obviously, this is going to sound like a silly question, but I got to ask it. You observe what you believe to be an item coming out of the front passenger window. You have no idea, nor can you offer any testimony about the person that threw it?
No, sir.
Right? Or the reason they threw it?
No, sir.
Okay. And also, this is going to sound like a silly question, but let me ask it anyway. You observed 3 people being taken out of the vehicle.
That's what I observed, yes.
Okay. And then you also saw the officers then approach the vehicle to confirm that there were no other occupants, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Officer Pearson, Mr. Clark asked you some questions about what you observed after the vehicle entered that last gas station before the apprehension. I want to go back and starting with where that vehicle came in, and again, describe for the jury what you're seeing and why you believe you're seeing what you're seeing, if that makes sense.
So at this point, I see them going into there. I go bright light, one, to make sure that my searchlight is on the vehicle. At that point, I observe a heat or an item with heat come out of the front passenger window, and then I observe the patrol units and several undercover vehicles come in to initiate a high-risk traffic stop. And at this point, I go to daylight, one, so that if we can show that the vehicles that are on scene are police vehicles, to include the undercover vehicles to show that they're have red and blue lights on them or some type of markings that you're able to see, like on that vehicle right there, it's got the flashing headlights on it.
Okay, and you said you saw the what you believe was the driver exiting first or being called out first?
As you can see, we lose visual of the vehicle as we're coming over the awning here, and then as we come over the top, it appears that there's a female being taken into custody right here by a sheriff's deputy by the pump. And per my training, the driver would be the first person to be removed, and the driver's door is the first one to be opened.
That was my next question. And then do you see the second person that is called out in this video?
Yes, the rear passenger door opens. We see what appears to be a male subject exit. And then he's called out per what I was trained also to come out with his hands up, and then is directed to come to the officers, not for the officers to go to them.
Could you tell what that individual that came out of the passenger side, what they were wearing?
It appeared to be a black shirt and like blue jean shorts.
And then you see the third individual in the vehicle being called out. and getting out the driver's side door?
Yes, it takes a little bit longer. I have no idea why, if it was a delay on the officer's part or what, but there is a little bit more of a delay between the second and the third.
And again, based on your training and your protocol, would it be protocol to have all of the occupants exit the same side?
Yes,
Why is
because
that?
that's the side that the officers are looking at. That's the side they've set up on. If the person is to get out on the other side, we would have to have officers there. That would create a crossfire situation, meaning that the officers, if one were to have to fire, there would be officers downrange from them on either side of the vehicle.
And you see that last person get out of the front
Yes,
driver's side door?
yes.
And just to clarify, can you explain again to the jury how you were able to determine that the object that you saw thrown out was in fact thrown out through the front passenger window?
When the vehicle makes the turn and I see the item come out, it continues in its turn to the point where I can see the passenger side of the vehicle. Like I explained, the glass will not transmit heat, so there will not, unless somebody is physically touching it or something is warming it up at that point, it won't transmit the heat through so that I can see it. But as the vehicle comes around the corner, you're able to see that there's a small crack at the top of that window to indicate that the window is open. And as the vehicle makes its turn there, I don't see that in any other part of that side of the vehicle. So through my training and experience, it tells me that the item came out of that portion of the vehicle.
Thank you. No further questions.
May we release the counsel?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Please sit down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
State and finance witness.
State calls Officer or Detective Rodney Montoya.
Please swear you in. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth and the penalty of law?
I do, Your Honor.
Take a seat.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
I am Rodney Montoya.
Okay, and where are you employed?
I am employed with the City of Rio Rancho Police Department.
For the record, could you also say and spell your last name, please? Say your first and last name and spell your last name. There we go.
Rodney Montoya, last name spelling Montoya.
How long have you been with the City of Rio Rancho Police Department?
A little over 11 years.
And did you have any prior law enforcement experience?
Yes, 6 years with the Raton Police Department.
What did you do with the Raton Police Department?
I was a patrol officer for the majority of my career there, but I was also a field investigator for 4 out of the 6 years.
What is a field investigator?
Basically, you process crime scenes, collect evidence, things of that nature, testify in court in reference to the items that you collected at mostly felony scenes.
So when you first came to Rio Rancho PD, what was your first assignment there?
My first assignment was a patrol officer. Within a year, I took on as a field investigator for my shift. I was the only field investigator for my shift, so I processed most of the smaller crime scenes.
Now, eventually, were you promoted to detective?
Yes, ma'am. The second year with the Rio Rancho Police Department.
And since you've been a detective, what kinds of crimes have you investigated?
I began in the property crimes unit. I did that for approximately a year. Eventually, I then moved to white-collar crimes. I did that for a short time, and then I was moved to the violent crimes unit.
How long were you within the violent crimes unit?
Approximately 7 years. I did some other types of cases, some higher profile cases for the city. My last year there, I was promoted to a corporal, and I pretty much took care of the higher profile cases with our department.
And did those include murders, homicides?
Yes, ma'am.
What are your current assignments there?
My current assignment, I am the sergeant of the Special Victims Unit.
And what does that entail?
The majority of the cases that we handle are crimes against children, whether they be child abuse or sexual assaults. But we also, under our umbrella, is crimes against elderly, sex crimes for adults, the crisis intervention team, and the crimes victims advocate unit.
Do you still sometimes assist some of the other detectives in investigating some of the violent crimes?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to direct your attention back to last Memorial Day of 2015. What happened that day?
That morning, I actually traveled to Raton, New Mexico to visit my parents early in the morning, left approximately 6 o'clock, had lunch with my parents, drove back to Albuquerque. At approximately 8:40, I received a call from Sergeant Brian Reese, who's a violent crime sergeant, and he informed me that Officer Greg Benner had conducted a traffic stop and he had been shot. He didn't have any information as to his injuries or his condition, but at that point he said that he wanted me to contact 2 detectives and have those detectives respond to the scene, which he said was near Southern and Pine Tree, near the Esterbone Memorial Library. And he asked me to have those detectives respond with the command post, which is a large RV, and the crime scene vehicle.
Did you, as part of your, I guess, duties with Rio Rancho, did you have any interaction with Officer Benner?
Maybe on training days, passing by in the hallway, I didn't have any type of personal relationship other than, hello, how are you doing? No, not with Officer Benner, I did not.
So when you arrived, well, did you go directly to the scene?
I was traveling to the scene.
I'm sorry, were you still on your way back from Raton?
No, I had already arrived back in Albuquerque at that time. I had been home for approximately an hour when I received the call. As I was traveling to the scene, I received a couple of calls. The first call was from Sergeant Reese, and he informed me, unfortunately, that Officer Benner had succumbed to his injuries. He had also informed me that the person who was suspected of doing this was still at large. And he also informed me that Officer Benner's lapel camera was located on the roadway. And he asked me if officers could view that lapel camera to see if there was any type of evidence to identify who the person was. So I instructed Sergeant Reese to get a field investigator, make sure he photographs that camera in place. Then I instructed him to go ahead and basically glove up, put some protective gloves on, and go ahead and collect the SD card, which was located within the camera. And then I instructed him to place the camera in as close proximity as possible to its original position. Go ahead and remove the SD card and go back and view the video to see if there was anybody that can be identified. The processing began. So Lieutenant Brett Dennison was in charge from our department from that particular area, and Lieutenant Shane Arthur and Sergeant Mark Soriano were in charge on the state police side. So even though it was our investigation, basically to protect the integrity of the evidence we're hoping to find, we decided that it would be best that state police was the lead in that portion, and we would provide assistance if needed.
And when you say protect the integrity, do you mean because the fallen officer was from Rio Rancho Police?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And did you continue to stay on at the scene on Pine Tree while the scene was being processed?
Yes.
And what was your role at that point?
Basically to make sure that everything was being done to my capability properly, and I didn't see anything that alarmed me to provide otherwise. Eventually, Sergeant Soriano informed me that a subject was taken into custody in Albuquerque at a Valero gas station, and he informed me that Andrew Romero was taken into custody, and also there was 2 females inside the vehicle, Crystal Romero and Michelle Candelaria were in the vehicle. So we talked about processing. So this changed and added another scene to the process. Sergeant Soriano informed me that he had enough agents at the scene to go ahead and take care of that scene, but he informed me that they had also obtained a search warrant for an apartment on 7904 Trumbull Avenue in Albuquerque, which I think was Crystal Romero's apartment. And he said that he did not have enough personnel to execute that warrant and requested assistance from our department to serve that warrant.
So did you provide personnel?
I did. I actually, myself, Detective Steve Gill, Detective Chris Carbajal, and originally it was going to be Detective Rick Romero and Detective Dennis Park were going to execute that warrant on Trumbull. So we began traveling to that area. Detective Romero and Detective Park were already on scene along with APD. APD was conducting a perimeter around, basically securing the residence until the warrant could be executed. I relayed this information to my supervisor. At that point was Captain Ron Vigil, and I informed him that we were going to process the scene. Prior to arriving, we actually stopped at the District 5 office, New Mexico State Police District 5 office, and I spoke with, I'm not sure his official title, but Agent Steve Montano. I informed him that we were in the process of going to serve the search warrant on Trumbull, and I was informed by my supervisor, Captain Vigil, that he wanted us to begin paperwork for a search warrant and possibly for arrest warrant paperwork. But I informed Agent Montano that basically we were starting to run on fumes out. By this point, it was already the next day, and like I said, we had been up, the earlier day, the day prior. And so Agent Montano informed me that he had agents that were there at the State Police office who were fresh and had knowledge of the information and would be happy to assist with the paperwork. So I relayed that information to Captain Vigil. At first he said that would be okay. And then I informed him we were traveling to the address on Trumbull. Prior to my arrival on Trumbull, I received a call from Captain Vigil. He said that he spoke with other administrators, and they preferred that our department go ahead and do the paperwork instead of New Mexico State Police. So I contacted Detective Romero and Detective Park, since they had most knowledge of this particular case. I requested that they respond back to the District 5 office and begin that paperwork. So myself, Detective Gill, and Detective Carbajal traveled to the apartment on Trumbull and began to execute that search warrant. And then we were assisted by 2 other detectives from our department, basically approximate middle point as we were executing that search warrant.
Was anything of evidentiary value found during that search?
No, ma'am. We processed the entire apartment, and we did not find anything that would assist us with this investigation.
Do you know if there were individuals from Rio Rancho or any of the other agencies sent to UNMH for any reason?
It's my understanding that Detective Park was sent there to interview Tabitha Littles.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Morning, Detective.
Good morning, sir.
All right, so you testified a moment ago about some of the things that you heard on the dispatch log, right?
Yes, sir.
And let's just explain to the jury for a moment, for those of us who are maybe uneducated about the way dispatch works, all right? So there's an audio recording of dispatch calls, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's kept in digital form, as well as there's a written account of what dispatch does too, right?
Yeah, they typed the information in the CAD report, yes.
Not handwritten, but
Correct.
I mean, it's reduced to a typewritten form.
Correct.
And so when I talk about dispatch logs, and please correct me if this language is not right, but I think I'm going to be speaking with you in your own language, okay?
Yes, sir.
Dispatch logs, you know what those are, right?
Yes.
And a dispatch log will be the typed account of what dispatch is receiving and then any communications they have, right?
According to that dispatcher.
Okay, so for instance, I'm just going to make an example. If the police pull someone over, they're going to make a call to dispatch reporting the driver's license and the plate number. I've just pulled over, plate number, blah, 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 right?
Yes.
And then dispatch will type that up.
Correct.
And so not only will we have the voice of the officer making the call, but we'll also have the voice of the dispatch saying Roger, and then it'll be typed in that that's the written account, right?
Correct.
Okay. So when you talk about going to dispatch or reviewing this, you're looking at both the typed account of what the officer's doing and what the dispatch is responding, right?
No, sir.
You're just listening to the audio.
I listen to the audio only,
Okay,
yes.
all right. And so when you're listening to the audio portion, then there's no mistake on what you hear, right?
There was kind of chaotic in the dispatch center. The first time I listened to it, I couldn't hear it properly. There was a lot of calls coming. There were a lot of calls coming in, a lot of chaos. So I informed Amber that I couldn't hear the information, and she supplied me with some headphones at that time. So I was able to.
Then you took extra precautions to make sure what you were hearing was correct, right?
Yes, sir.
Because, I mean, this is big stuff, and you want to make sure if this dispatch recording has any evidentiary value, you want to make sure you're hearing it correctly, right?
Yes.
And so you took this extra precaution to put on headphones to maybe filter out any sort of background noise so you could hear correctly, right?
Yes, sir.
And what you were able to determine was that that Officer Benner, during this final stop, called in a license and asked for information regarding Tabitha Littles, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, have you ever seen the photograph taken by one of the photographers that shows Tabitha Little's license, the physical license in Officer Benner's vehicle?
I actually observed that when we did the inner perimeter walkthrough.
Okay, so you saw that, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the information came back on Miss Littles, right?
Yes, sir.
And indicated that she was on probation for the things you've already talked about, robbery and trafficking drugs and such, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then on the 1999 Dodge Durango, the information came back on who that Durango was registered to as well, right?
Yes, to Tabitha
To
Littles.
Tabitha Littles,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And so the other information you had on some other individual was Albert Fresquez, right?
It was Frequez. What I heard Officer Benner provide was Frequez.
Okay. Obviously, you speak Spanish, right?
I don't, no, sir.
You don't. Fresquez is more common pronunciation.
That would be more common, yes, sir.
Okay. But Officer Benner related as something different, right?
Correct.
Okay. But there was a date of birth?
Yes.
What you do know from listening to that recording, the audio recording from the dispatcher, is there's never a mention of Andrew Romero, is there?
No, sir.
No. And the vehicle, the 1999 Dodge, doesn't have any relationship, as far as you know. There's no relation between that Dodge and Andrew Romero, as at least registration or ownership, right?
At that time, no, sir.
Okay. And you've never learned of anything different, right? That
Correct.
He doesn't have some sort of ownership interest in that vehicle?
That's correct.
Now, you indicated that the two other individuals that you received information, that two other individuals that were arrested along with Andrew several hours later were Michelle Candelaria and Crystal Romero, right?
I don't know if they were arrested.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
I'm sorry.
I'll restate the question.
They were not arrested.
No, I'll restate the question. Two other individuals that were taken into custody with, or apprehended or taken out of the car, let's just use it, taken out of the car, were Michelle Candelaria and Crystal Romero, right?
The information that I got from Sergeant Mark Soriano was there were two females in the vehicle that Mr. Romero was apprehended in.
Okay, and their names were Michelle Candelaria and Crystal Romero, right?
Correct.
You don't know what might have happened to them?
I don't know, sir.
Have you ever been shown or have you ever seen a photograph of the Durango keys?
No, sir.
Have you ever seen an evidence tag that lists the Durango keys as having been taken into custody by anyone?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, you made the decision to hand over the investigation, at least the processing the crime scene, to New Mexico State Police, right?
Correct.
And one of the reasons for this decision is this is a big deal, right?
Yes.
And one of the reasons to assign a specific agency is so that there wouldn't be, that there'd be one clearinghouse for information, and New Mexico State Police is well equipped to do this kind of big case, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes?
As the other agencies were also.
Sure,
But
sure, but you don't want, you wouldn't want one agency to find a piece of evidence and another agency not to know about it, right?
correct. I felt it would be better to have one agency.
Sure, sure. And so in this case, the one agency was chosen, the New Mexico State Police, and they are going to be the clearinghouse, or would be the clearinghouse for all information that's taken in this case, right? Or, right, like all the evidence that was taken into custody would have gone through New Mexico State Police at some point in time, right?
And also Agent Rick Romero, or from our department.
From your department?
Yes, because he is actually the head of this case.
Okay. So, at least as far as you know, there's not a set of Durango keys sitting at the Rio Rancho Police Department in the evidence department that somehow haven't been accounted for, right?
I have no idea. I never looked at the evidence log, nor have saw these keys.
You've never been apprised that the Durango keys were taken into custody by the Rio Rancho?
No,
Police
sir.
Department, right?
I have not.
Or that maybe they were photographed by the Rio Rancho Police Department, but that photograph was someplace else?
I have not, no, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Hold on, I may have one more question. Also, let me just back up a little bit. I asked you some things about evidence, but I kind of didn't ask you about qualifications. So you are a detective, right?
Correct.
And one of the things I asked you about is the evidence locker at Rio Rancho Police Department, right? I just asked you, in this case, were you aware of any evidence at the Rio Rancho Police Department in the evidence locker, right?
Yes.
Okay. But I need to ask you a couple more questions about the importance of logging evidence. Based on your training and experience, you know the importance of making sure that anything that's taken into custody is logged, right?
Yes.
And there's things called evidence receipt forms, right?
Chain of custody forms?
Chain of custody forms.
Yes.
If, say, for instance, the police take me into custody, they're going to search me, right?
Correct.
And they're going to document exactly what I have on me, right?
Correct.
Like, for instance, if I have $47 and a syringe and a meth pipe, they're going to make sure that all that's documented, right?
Correct.
And along with maybe I have on a tank top and a sweat jacket, they're going to make sure that's all in custody, right?
All your personal property, yes.
Because you want to make dead certain that when a suspect, for instance, is taken into custody, there's documentation at that time of what that person has on their body, right?
That would be the proper thing to do, yes.
You wouldn't want there ever to be a question later as to whether somebody had something, like, say, a set of keys, or a pistol, or a dope pipe, or dope. You wouldn't want there to be a question about whether or not they had that on them at the time, right?
There shouldn't be a question.
There should never be a question. Based on your training experience, there should never be a question about what someone has on them when they're taken into custody, right?
There shouldn't be, yes, sir.
Because it should always be documented on
Will you be released?
Yes, Ron.
You said that.
Thank you.